Welcome Red Team family to another YouTube video. Now for today's video we're going to be talking on social engineering in the aspect of physical security and on a couple of tips and tricks that I have for you guys. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Welcome Red Team family. So in today's video we're going to be talking about social engineering. So there is, in my opinion, a really false, large misconception about what social engineering is. If you look at a lot of services of companies that perform social engineering, if you look into the details of what they do in terms of social engineering, it always comes down to performing social engineering as in just phishing attempts. But it turns out that social engineering is more than just a phishing email. Social engineering actually involves phishing, vishing, which is actually getting on the phone and calling your target, and not last but not least, physical security in the mix of social engineering using the human element. So one question that I get often is that as a social engineer, how can you practice your skills, as in your personal skills? Because it's not often that you get hired to actually go on site to a company to try to break in and do, you know, your social engineering engagement. So a couple of tips and tricks that I have for that. Wherever you go to do your day-to-day errands, that whenever you have to actually walk into a building, into an office, or your daily commute, be on the lookout. Start memorizing things and remember things. Like for example, if you walk into a building where you go on a daily basis, right? As soon as you walk in, what kind of locks are they using? What kind of cameras are they using? Where are the cameras positioned and what direction are the cameras pointing? If you were to get into that building, what would be the best approach for you to get in without getting caught? Now, when I say the memory game, is that the further you advance in spotting these things, try to remember where they are. See if you can, after you left the area, if you can actually sit down and map out and try to trace exactly where you saw everything in that location, and that becomes eventually a natural habit. Like whenever you go somewhere, you start looking at where the cameras are, what kind of locks are using, entry points, exit points, that kind of stuff. Now, how is this useful, you may wonder? Well, let's say for example, if you're hired to do a social engineering engagement, right? And the pretext that you want to use is that the company, they're hiring someone for X position, right? And you create your fake LinkedIn profile with the requirements for that position, right? You submit your resume and you get called in for an interview. Now, once you get called into that interview, very likely they're actually going to give you a tour through the facility. Now, even though you might not get the job, I mean, realistically, you do not want to get that job, but still they're actually going to give you a tour of the building. So you might get a glimpse of where they have cameras, where they have doors, if they have alarms, where they have all the sensors and that kind of stuff. So like you can create a mental map. So then once you're off site, that you're with your engagement team, you can actually start tracing where all the stuff that you saw in the building are located. So that way further ahead, when you do a re-engagement and you try to get in, now you know what to look for. For tip number 2, you're going to dress according to your environment and wear props. It all depends on where you're trying to infiltrate, and also depends on the pretext that you're going to be using. There's many pretexts that you can actually use. It all depends on the environment that you're trying to get in. It all really depends. So you want to blend in with the environment. For a lot of commercial and industrial stuff, you would wear something like this. You can use a pretext that you're some sort of an auditor or a service provider and you're performing an inspection. There's many different pretexts. Another tip on getting uniforms, because it can be expensive if you start spending on brand new uniforms, not knowing what kind of engagement you're going to be doing. I do recommend going to your local Goodwill. Very likely in the local Goodwill, you're going to be able to find already pre-used uniforms for very cheap. I'm talking about like maybe $5 for a polo with already a logo on it. And the benefit of using a pre-owned polo is that it's a little bit worn out, so it doesn't look like perfect because it can happen that, for example, in an engagement, you use a brand new printed polo shirt, then you try to approach using that polo, you could get spotted and caught. So as a third tip for social engineers, I would recommend to practice your open-ended questions and your active listening. By active listening and open-ended questions, I mean like this. Let's say you're doing reconnaissance. And let's say that on the reconnaissance that you're performing, you see that the employees of a company, they go to a local restaurant to grab lunch, right? But it turns out that the restaurant is open to anybody to access. So anybody can go to the restaurant and have lunch there. So when you actually go to the restaurant, you're gonna see employees there having lunch, whatever, and you try to interact with them. So most of you, if you try to approach one of those employees and you try to ask him, it's like, hey, you work there, right? Very likely they're gonna say yes, because you clearly can see the uniform, you probably can see their badge, they clearly work there. So
better say something or they'll think you're stupid.
closed-ended questions are the ones that ended in yes or no. However, open-ended questions could be an infinite amount of answers. Like it could be anything that they prefer to respond. And as my example as before, you go to a restaurant, very likely most of you might ask, oh, you work at that company. They're gonna say yes, or they're gonna say no. However, the question that I would ask is, for example, if I clearly see the uniform and I clearly see the badge that they actually work there, I would open up probably with a joke and say something along the lines of, hey, so what does it feel like being the boss there? And they'll probably laugh and start interacting. Then they'll say, oh no, I'm not the boss. The boss is whoever. And they already start sharing information. They're probably gonna say, what is the name of the boss? And you start gathering information. Oh, interesting. So are you a manager there? Oh no, the manager is someone else or whatever. Or this might be the manager. So now you know who to target. So that is open-ended questions and active listening. That's a key element for social engineers. And then last tip that we have for today, for this video, to not make it too long, is when you're doing social engineering, the whole purpose of performing the engagement is to get in. But then what do you do when you get in? Like, you're not just gonna go and walk in and then that's it, right? Take a picture and okay, I'm here. No. So the whole purpose of you performing the engagement and you getting inside of the building is two. One of them is to actually gain as much recon as possible so you can bring back to your team and then perform a physical entry if that is what you guys are doing. And the second is to, if possible, leave your implants. So some of the stuff that you may carry with you when you're doing a social engineering engagement, one of them would be, for example, an RFID detector card for you to perform frequency detection, as well as a set of lockpicks. This is one that I use often. It actually looks like a pen. He's concealed very easily. Because here's the thing, sometimes you might approach a building and you're able to talk to someone and they give you somewhat a level of access. And by whatever means, like if at any moment that you're in that building, they give you a certain amount of time for you to be alone, and let's say there's a locked door or something and you have a chance to actually do lock picking, you actually want to carry a set of lock picks with you so you can actually try to take it a step further and see what you can get. Another set that I use, as you guys know, is a covert instrument. I don't go anywhere without this. This is my daily driver. And a couple of other things in terms of implants, I would use the rubber ducky every once in a while, or actually I would use the DG Spark. There's ways of actually you building it. It's a lot cheaper than the rubber ducky. For the DG Spark, you're looking at probably $3 for each. So it's something that you wouldn't really mind leaving behind. So you can just upload your script to it, plug it in, and leave it. Now, one of my favorites is actually the OMG plug. It's similar to the rubber ducky, but when you actually plug it into the computer, it actually has Wi-Fi access, so you can actually connect to it with Wi-Fi, and from there you can actually have somewhat of a terminal and remote execution, like you can send commands to it. And you also have, one of my favorites nowadays is the key crock. Plug this in behind a keyboard, come back a few days later, and you have collected your loot. Whenever you're performing social engineering, always do carry your implants, because if not, what's the purpose of actually getting in? Like, you want to do your engagement and collect information as much as possible, but at the same time, you actually want to gain a foothold into the target's network. So that's what I have for today. If you liked the video, please go ahead and smash that like button. If you haven't subscribed, I do invite you to subscribe. I will be uploading more videos soon. And without further ado, have a good one.